a lot of the smaller kind of service-based contract manufacturers that I talk to, I'm always encouraging them to do things like figure out how to start tracking data, whether that be, how many parts per hour you're pumping out, whether it be how long does it take to turn over a machine, whether it be, just what's the quality of those products once they come off, how often are you getting defects, things like that. So I kind of consider that tracking data to be step one in integrating some sort of automation into your process. What are some things that they could be thinking about along the lines of design for automation that maybe we hadn't thought of? Maybe it's the way that they're designing their fixtures for the parts, or, maybe the way that they're coming out of the machine after it's done. Like, what are some things that you've come across?
Yeah. So one of the things that really seems to be a trend really is tracking each individual product as it goes through. Now, you might be talking a large product, a small product. Of course, barcodes, QR codes are a really great way to do that sort of thing. The QR code may contain something as simple, small, and basic as it's simply a lot number. But it's also helpful as you try to build out your process to have additional information, metadata, if you will, be captured. Now, it doesn't have to go into the code itself. The code can really just be a serial number, as it were. But you need to build just enough computer back-end support so that instead of simply pulling a piece of raw material off of the in box and putting it on the machine to be done and then putting it on the out box, part of that first level process is I'm going to put a QR code on there, and now at every subsequent step we're going to scan that QR code. And that's nice, that gives you a good starting place, but there's a lot of additional information you can now connect to that.
Right.
Who was the operator? Who was working on that machine? What was the machine? You might even want to mark your tools. I mean, in the case of a 5-axis milling machine, you want to keep track of which milling heads are being used, because what if some of them are wearing out and now we're suddenly getting a worse finish, or our tolerances aren't quite as good? Well, now we can track it back to maybe it was an operator, and it's not to go and get after the operator. We're not trying to get them in trouble, but we're going to do some better training for them, or we're going to swap out the tools or sharpen them, or also we want to be able to track back to the lot of material. Where did it come from? Did we do an incoming inspection on the quality of that lot of material when it came in the door? And now can we track an end product all the way back through the process to the raw material and every step along the way?
Hey, I'm Nate Wheeler. I am the host of Manufacturing Insiders Podcast. Really want to thank you for joining today. I hope that you learned some really great insights from this manufacturing leader that you're about to hear from. I also hope that you'll go ahead and hit that like button on the video and subscribe to our channel so you can see more of the stuff that comes out as we're continuing to publish content. Every like, every subscribe really helps us get this message out. And the message that we're sharing is really just a message of hope for manufacturers. I understand, I work with you guys every day. I understand how many different obstacles are in your faces, from technology to government regulations to competition from foreign and domestic markets. And I really want to share strategies with you on how to deal with these issues. And I think there's no better way to learn than hearing directly from somebody that solves some of these challenges. Thanks for watching today, and look forward to seeing you soon.
I'll give you an example that isn't something that we've actually done, but could fit with what we do. I love going into the laser shops and seeing the automation that they use to cut out parts. But when they're done with those parts, ultimately they need to measure and make sure they're consistent. Now, fortunately, the laser cutting machines are amazingly consistent, so you tend not have to do a lot of measurements like pulling out the calipers and making sure that the cut dimensions were right. Then again, if you get a batch of metal that happens to be a little softer than the last batch of steel, the laser might overcut. You might get a little bit more goo sticking out of the edges on those laser cut edges, and they tend to get hand polished. So the traditional way of doing that is they're going to have to get out a big caliper and check some critical dimensions, and that's a very manual process. So something that we could do, haven't done, but could do, is set up a very basic version of a machine vision system that has a high-resolution camera that takes a picture of each finished piece and does those measurements automatically. Again, that equipment's quite available. If you're building cars or something like that and you're making 1,000 body panels a month, they're going to have that kind of automation. But we're trying to make it more accessible to the small to medium business where they're doing a lot of manual measurements. And it's not that we're trying to eliminate humans. We want to have our human capital invested in working. We want to have people that are core to our business. We want to take care of our people. But we also don't want to have our people having to do boring, repetitive tasks that are error prone. We'd rather automate those so that we can use our people to do the things that people are really good at and take advantage of their minds and their skills.
Right, absolutely. And in my understanding, what you're kind of doing is building some flexibility into these systems. So in that laser cutting example, that company could use essentially the same system to then inspect a different part. So instead of dropping, $200,000 on this inspection system and $200,000 on that inspection system, you're finding ways to kind of put them together. Is that right?
That's 100% right, and really a great point. We very intentionally, when we build a system like that, instead of, because the simple way, the shortest way to get that thing built is you build in the measurements for the one piece that they need it for. Right. But instead, we'll talk to them about, hey, can we spend a little more time, a few extra hours, let us build a more arbitrary system where you can take any piece, cut the piece out with the laser, put it under here, make sure you've got one right. Do the manual measurements. We'll take the picture and try and automatically determine what the critical dimensions are, let you tweak it, and now you have a system that they can throw every piece of sheet metal on that comes off of one of those lasers after the polishing process is done, and ensure that all the parts are the same. Like you say, now they're able to use that for all of their clients, their customers, instead of just one.
Right. And that's really the solution that we're looking for these high mix, low volume scenarios that a lot of manufacturers are in that have traditionally struggled to get into automation because they just can't justify the cost, because they aren't going to have a separate automated solution for every one of their processes. So building these flexible systems really seems to be the solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, when you are kind of looking out at the market, it sounds like you could be interested in somebody in that laser cutting scenario, or even, a machine shop that, is pumping out, 100 parts, every few minutes off of a, three axis machine. Has there been anything that you've been like, man, I would really love to get into that. I could really solve some problems there?
Yeah, actually, that's a really great question. And after a little bit of thought, I think there's a problem in the world of consumer electronics. We get a lot of e-waste. There are a lot of things that people get them and they're either too inexpensive and they get thrown away, or they're expensive enough that they use them for a while and in some cases they trade them up. We have a lot of phones and other things getting used and reused and thrown away, and we end up with a lot of stuff in the waste stream, a lot of things to be recycled. What we're trying to do is make the manufacturing process cleaner, more repeatable, so we're not losing those products, and so they're not having to be manually tested, because people, frankly, it gets really boring having to test the same things over and over again. So what we're trying to build is something a little bit like what you described with the machine shop, but for electronics. So in electronic contract manufacturing, they have an extraordinarily high mix of types of products. They'll have some customers that build 1,000 a month of something, some that build a batch of 100 of something every 6 months. And yes, you might have a written process for how to test and verify and make sure that what you've built goes out the door correctly. But there are so many parts on those circuit boards that sometimes the test coverage, it doesn't find every little flaw. And then you end up with your customers being the beta testers. You send something out and they end up having to return something, and you don't know for sure, is it because they broke it? Or is this really a legitimate warranty return because it wasn't built correctly? So the little box we're building is designed to make test fixtures that can test these electronic devices. And again, be very generic, like the platform that can test 100 different types of cut metal parts from a machine shop. This can test 100 or 1,000 different types of little circuit boards. It's smart enough to know which test fixture, test accessory has been plugged in, because for For example, a little Bluetooth fitness tracker that goes on your wrist, you might need a little cradle that hooks to certain connections and goes through a little box, and then that box will use a very generic cable that plugs into our box. But the boxes are now smart enough to talk to each other and say, oh, this is the Bluetooth fitness tracker, not just the Bluetooth fitness tracker, but it's version A, B, or C that goes out the door. So it tests the right parts for the right ones. And you end up with much higher quality products being delivered to the end customers, much lower fallout rates, and on the environmental side, we end up with a lot less e-waste, a lot less stuff that is either being recycled or, in worst case, not being recycled and ends up in the landfill.
That's fascinating. So, I am not enough of an electrical engineer to understand much here, but so, when you've got so the fitness tracker, for example, you've got, 150 different components on the circuit boards inside of that device. How is your program tested? What is it testing them for? Is the capacitor functioning properly? Like, what is it testing?
Yeah, so in a fitness tracker example, first off, we need to make sure that the charging port is working, whether that's a magnetic charger or a plugged-in charger. So we can measure how much voltage current is being used. Is the tracker actually charging the battery?
Right.
We can use the Bluetooth interface in the test computer to talk to the fitness tracker. And part of the design for manufacturability, design for automation, is also being built into the software, and our firmware and software team knows and does this a lot. They will put features into the software of the fitness tracker that allows it to self-test. Now the end user never sees that, but that function gets used in the factory to validate. Is the fitness tracker working correctly? It might be as simple as it puts a message up on the screen that tells the test person, please take the fitness tracker and turn it upside down. Because inside the fitness tracker is an accelerometer, a sensor that detects movement. Right. And we need to make sure that accelerometer is working. Right. So we can automate a little bit by having the computer determine, did the amount of gravity that we sense change correctly? Right. Or maybe we'll take a little servo motor, like from a remote controlled airplane, and we'll make it flip the fitness tracker over inside the fixture. And now we've automated that, and we save the human factor of having to turn the thing over.
I see. Okay. Wow. Yeah. That's some complicated stuff. So you mentioned the design for automation, and a lot of the manufacturers, or I would assume every manufacturer is familiar with the term design for manufacturability. Is something we talk about a lot. Mm-hmm. What is the crossover between design for manufacturability and design for automation, and where do they part ways?
Yeah, really, the funny thing is a lot of design for manufacturability, at least in the electronics world, is a huge crossover with design for automation. A large list of the design for manufacturability guidelines for an electronic product are, you can't put components right near the edge of the circuit board because the machine needs to be able to grip the circuit board to put the parts on and run it through the reflow oven. Similarly, when you're manufacturing a part, even in a machine shop, designing something that's manufacturable often involves making two parts because there's no way to machine a single part. Right. So you have to be planning ahead of time, not just what does the product look like, but how am I going to put that product together? Along with that comes things, is the O-ring going to seal properly and protect the electronics from moisture or something like that? That crossover in electronics can be even more intense because there are so many different component suppliers that if you choose a kind of a low-end, bottom-of-the-barrel bargain basement component supplier, you can end up with unreliable components. And it might work, it might test out okay, at least sort of, but it will have a shorter lifetime in the field. So there's also some supply chain management and things like that really go into building high-quality products. You really need good ingredients in order to build those good high-quality products.